Shalom and welcome to another edition of Parsha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elliot Malamed in Highland Park, New Jersey, at the Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation, Anshe Emet, and joining me, my good friends, Rabbi Barry Chesler, Solomon Sheikh, the Day School of Long Island, Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanovsky of Anshe Chesed in New York City. We're so glad to be able to be with you together. We're recording this during Chol HaMoed Pesach. We have Shabbat Parshat Shmini coming up. We have the 7th and 8th days of Pesach coming up, which bring, obviously, Pesach to its conclusion. These are important days in the congregation and in the community and Jewish people. We're recording this also during the Iran war and thinking of our brothers and sisters, all family, and everyone in Israel who are in and out of shelters and really experiencing the grinding nature of what is turning out to be quite a grinding and long war. We pray for them. We pray for their safety. We pray that they be sheltered safely, both out of harm's way and under the canopy of God's protection. Amen. We want to make a kind of different topic, but it's not out of the calendar. It's on the calendar. This topic, rather than speak about Shmini, we want to talk about the custom of studying Pirkei Avot during the weeks between Passover and Shavuot. There are 6 Shabbatot during the 7 weeks of counting, and it just so happens that Pirkei Avot consists of 6 chapters. Originally there were 5 chapters, but the 6th chapter was appended to the Pirkei Avot. So in all of our editions, it consists of 6 chapters. And what a coincidence. 6 chapters, 6 weeks. We can move through the 6 weeks of the Sfira d'Omer, which are 7 weeks, but the 6 Shabbatot, by devoting each one chapter consecutively to each week. And that has become a time-honored custom. And like many time-honored customs in Judaism, no one knows really where it originates. Some would say it goes all the way back to the Gaonic period. And
You don't think it's Halachah Moshe Sinai?
not really. But to this day now, I mean, all of our contemporary Sidurim that are used for Shabbat will include Pirkei Avot. It's almost chanted liturgically rather than studied, and that itself makes it fascinating that we would read it as a required text. We would daven it as opposed to really study it. So before we try and think about it, Pirkei Avot literally translates as the chapter of the fathers. It's located in the Mishnah. It's located at the end of the order of the Mishnah known as Nizikin, which is damages. It happens to be that location in the 6 orders of the Mishnah is probably close enough to the center. That would be my guess, that this is so important as wisdom that it's located at the heart of the Mishnah. Like many important texts in antiquity, or the heart of the text is usually the most important thing, and so that would be my homiletical take, my sermonic take on the location of Pirkei Avot. But what makes Pirkei Avot enchanting, really, is that I want to just pitch it to you as I would compare it to the Haggadah. And here I'll give you my first topic, which is compare and contrast these texts as accessible entry points into rabbinic culture. And I'm going to turn to you, Rabbi Kalmanovsky. Entry points to rabbinic culture. What makes Pirkei Avot accessible? What makes it like the Haggadah? And who are these people anyway that we're talking about? That's a whole course right there.
Well,
Well,
I'll do the intro to the course.
good. Okay.
Not the whole course. I actually don't think that the Haggadah, I mean, the Haggadah is obviously addressed at the wider population of the Jewish people, but it's not maybe the world's most accessible thing because, L'saper b'yetzias Mitzrayim, we're going to tell the story of the Exodus from Egypt. Story is very dramatic in the Tanakh, in the Torah, and the Haggadah, includes some dramatic stuff, but some very technical sort of, rabbinic stuff. Possibly, did I mean to be Rosh Chodesh? No, it can't be Rosh Chodesh. It has to be when the matzah and the maror are in front of you, and 50 plagues and 250 plagues, and those are like native conversations to rabbinic professionals. Now, I don't mean like professional rabbis like they work in a shul. I mean like in the ancient period, that was an internal rabbinic conversation. And most of the Talmud and Mishnah is an internal rabbinic conversation. But what I think makes Pirkei Avot different, and where it really is accessible, is that you don't really have to know anything in advance of coming to Pirkei Avot. It doesn't require, it's not a 5,000 level seminar. Every human being can get something out of the maxims that they teach you, and you don't have to have tremendous amount of prior knowledge, and it's not technical stuff like how do you offer the sacrifices, which the rabbis never offered themselves. They just recount how to do it, or how is it that what's some other technical detail, how should Gitin be executed. This is not for rabbis. This is for everybody, and I think that the audience for this book is everybody, and it is calibrated to be that way.
So it's interesting, bring to mind technical halachic conversations. I was just thinking back, since we are, hosted on the Camp Ramah and the Berkshires website and Kol Ramah, we used to teach this class on finding lost objects, and the technical halachot, the Jewish law pertaining to what do you do when you find lost objects. Those are laws included in earlier tractates of the order of nizikin and order of damages. What kinds of things do you have to search for their owner? What kinds of things can you keep if you find them? What kinds of things do you have to announce? You have to publicize if you find them. These are technical halachic conversations. One could argue anything doing with liturgy, and when you recite the Shema, that's the first Mishnah in the whole Talmud, is what time do you start reciting the Shema in the evening? That's a technical discussion. We just completed the Seders, and you want to talk about technical discussions, talk about how much matzah do you need to eat, what the time span between the adding of water to the flour, what constitutes a mixture. All of these are technical discussions, but Pirkei Avot, it really doesn't give you a technical discussion. It gives you wisdom. If you're looking for wisdom, I would say turn to Pirkei Avot.
There's a small number of the Mishnayot in Avot which are kind of oriented towards judges, like Chachamim hisharu b'divreichem, sages, be careful how you express yourself, and Habim marbelach korta edim, examine the witnesses very, very thoroughly. Okay, that's aimed at sages or judges, but the substantial majority of it is imani mili, who's going to be for myself. That's not germane to religious Judaism per se. That's about life, and I will we sometimes talk about pop culture, Jewish culture, and what's Sibat HaSibot, the Ishai Ribo song.
Yeah.
Mishnah Avot, Perek Gimel, Chaviv Adam Nivra B'Tzelem. He says,
person is
Pirkei Avot, the third chapter, all people are created in the divine image. Okay, definitely the only Mishnah reference in a song, in a pop song, is to Pirkei Avot. It's probably not exactly the only reference, but I just think that that's a vivid illustration of the kind of things that everybody needs to know for a Jewish orientation to the world. It comes.
Well, what you're saying is that it imprints itself on the culture and, of course, on the language of Hebrew. all the way from Mishnaic Hebrew right up till modern Hebrew as well. Barry, I want to chime you in here.
So I think what strikes me about Pirkei Avot is that it speaks to a multivalent community. In the Talmud, we're used to two, three, maybe occasionally four opinions on a matter, but Pirkei Avot is filled with tens of different voices and all talking about different things. And it comes to remind us, I think, that in a community, we're not looking for agreement so much as we're looking for understanding. And you have to listen in order to understand Pirkei Avot because the voices are so varied. The other thing I would point out is that the structure of Pirkei Avot lends itself to memorization. Most of the rabbis say three things. Occasionally there are five things. There are lists of 10. And I think it allows a person to take it with them. You could study a small passage, memorize it pretty quickly, and then think about it as you go about your business. And its goal is to refine you as a human being, refine you as a person. And sometimes what we lose sight of the fact as Jews is that we're actually part of the human race, not just the Jewish community. And we have much in common with other people that it's good to remind ourselves of.
Well, I want to pick up on that theme because, as someone who gives a sermon from time to time and teaches a class from time to time, this is the anchor of our learning. And it's not only the anchor of learning in content, but it's an anchor of learning in terms of form. And I find sometimes, and here I'm not giving away any secrets, in building a short, talk, I will often think of, groups of three or groups of four. If I come up with a list of three things, then I know I have a talk. Basically, I know I have something. And I often think that Pirkei Avot, since the numbers 3 and 4 are so predominant in organizing the various rabbinic statements, that perhaps this is just a kind of short form digest of longer speeches. I gave a talk this past week on what makes a person joyful, what makes a person content, what ought to make a person humble, and what ought to make a person interesting. So I picked 4 ideas. Joy based on gratitude, contentment based on admiration, humility based on awe, and what makes a person interesting is if they know stories. A lot of, that's it's that line in the Haggadah. Everyone who does this, it's not that they are praiseworthy. It makes them interesting. If you know the story, if you know a lot of stories about a lot of things, of people, and you live in in the world where you are able to convey things about stuff, you become you become a character also. That's what I was trying to say. So, and I organized that around 4, basically, picking up a cue from Pirkei Avot. There are 4 types of people, there are 4 types of attributes, etc., etc. For that reason, it's accessible, and it's memorizable, and it's wisdom. People want wisdom. We've been saying, "Ma'an yavo izri," where from whence does my help come? That's Psalm 121. But I think people also saying, from where am I going to get wisdom? So they look to us for wisdom. We're
Once in a while,
smart.
we have it. One thing that's interesting about this book is I don't know the total number of individual sages who are quoted in the
It's a
Mishnah,
lot.
but there's a few guys who make very, very, very common appearances, and we have a little bit of a sense about the chronology in which people live. Pirkei Avot is completely out of chronology. It starts off with the Zugot. It starts off with people in ancient, like pre-rabbinic times, right? Antigonos ish Sochu and Yossi ben Yoezer ish Tsereda. These are not the thick end of the beam of participants in Mishnaic culture. They're really, really, really old, and then you get to obviously Hillel and Shammai, And then you jump to Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, which is the end of the Mishnaic period, and Rabban Gamliel, his son, okay, Rabban Gamliel Benoshel Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, who's already like after the Tanaim or at the tail end of the Tanaim, and he gets quite a few quotations. And then we have, we also have some people who, um, the great praise of Rabbi Elazar ben Arach. Actually, the Talmud records, I think this is actually in Avot Rabbi Natan, although it may be in the Talmud itself, um, that he kind of left rabbinic culture. And Rabbi Elazar ben Arach outweighs all others. Even if Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanos was with all the other sages, Elazar ben Arach would outweigh him. He actually is portrayed not quite like Elisha ben Abuya, but who is also in the book as portrayed as being a sage. And then there's a bunch of people who I don't know if they appear anywhere else. Like what's this guy?
Ben Hey.
Ben Hey.
And Bagbag.
Ben Bagbag. No, but there's we have Akabi ben Mahalalel, who's like a Pharisaic early figure, and then you have what do we have? Chalafta Rabbi Chalafta ben Dosa Ish Kfar Hananya. I don't think that you very often hear it. Rabbi Elazar Ish Bartota and Rabbi Dostai and somebody. What was that guy? Levitas.
Rabbi Nas.
Not Levinas said a lot, but you don't know what the hell he means. But wait, I missed. But whatever. I'm just pointing out that there are people given prominence in this book, in Pirkei Avot, who you would not, generally speaking, call prominent figures in the rabbinic literature.
So why don't we turn to? I'm going to just pitch the first one out because I think for our numerous viewers and listeners, and we thank you for watching and listening.
Rabbi Levitas Ish Yavne.
Ish Yavne.
Mishnah, chapter 4, Mishnah 4. Rabbi Levitas Ish Yavne. No idea how often he gets quoted in the Talmud.
Chapter 1, Mishnah 1. Moshe kibel Torah miSinai. Moses received the Torah from God at Sinai. Umisara liYoshua. He handed it off to Joshua. V'Yoshua lezkenim. Joshua to the elders. Uzkenim leNevi'im, and the elders to the prophets. Unevi'im masarua l'anshei knesset hagdolah, and the Nevi'im, the prophets, transmitted it to the men of the great assembly. And they said three things. Havu mitunim badin, be deliberate in judgment. Va'amidu talmidim arbe, have a lot of students. Va'asus yag laTorah, and make a protective fence for the Torah. So let's just take it, line by line. Moses received the Torah from Sinai.
So, Elliot, here I think it's important to note that is perhaps the most common mistranslation of a text. As Moses received Torah, because this is the rabbinic revolution. It's talking about the oral Torah, not about the written Torah. So and it said HaTorah, everyone would understand the written Torah, but this is the rabbi's understanding that the oral Torah came from Mount Sinai.
So delete the definite article, the Torah, and say Moshe kibel Torah. Moses received Torah from Sinai.
Teaching.
And here we're talking about.
While Barry's point is correct, obviously, that it is a claim for the divine anchoring of rabbinic tradition. I would actually take, maybe this is not a description of what is said in Pirkei Avot, but it's the way I think about Judaism, is that Moses received instruction at Sinai. And what we do with it is an ongoing process of development. Because, there's, when people say, oh, no, Moses also got the oral Torah at Sinai. Well, which one? Is it like Abaye or like Rabbah? Is it like Rav or Shmuel?
So what I would add here,
instead, it's the growthful interpretive power of the rabbis.
So that's encapsulated in the two different verbs that are used, kibel and masarah. The kibel generates Kabbalah, the rabbinic word for tradition, and Misaruha, Misora, which is another word for tradition. Kabbalah is what you receive, Misora is what you hand down, and it's to teach us that what we receive is never exactly what we hand down, that each generation is the fulcrum of tradition. They take what we receive, and some of it we're going to hand down to the next generation. And it's a dynamic process, and it's always been that way, even though some of our colleagues in different parts of the Jewish world think it's been fixed since time immemorial. That's never been the case.
It's very interesting because every subculture within Judaism has its own kind of chain of tradition. We the three of us, we are part of the seminary tradition, and we are basically students of the students of the students of people like Solomon Schechter, Louis Finkelstein, Mordechai Kaplan, Abram Joshua Heschel, and on and on. Those individuals are they're fairly loom large in our lore. And of course, what this first Mishnah is doing is it's validating the idea that you live in a tradition and you are part of that. You are part of this chain or this ongoing receiving and transmission. And it has had ruptures in the past. We might be experiencing one in the present because there are people around who say we're not necessarily adherent to all the people that have transmitted it down, especially now. I'm thinking about the various advantages of AI. AI is not a transmitter, a personal transmitter, but a person could theoretically open up their computer and receive the tradition from an artificial source. So in the age of AI, I would say this actually has a very important message because it comes from human sources here.
I mean, having had you talk about the students of the students of the students. So we have been the students of the students of Shaul Lieberman.
Yes.
And I have studied with, Professor Halivni, David Weiss Halivni, and Shama Friedman. Shama Friedman is a different kind of figure, but those other two people really knew rabbinic literature by heart, and the bikiyut, the wide-ranging expertise that comes from knowing it, or that comes from knowing how to use a CD-ROM, right? Because CD-ROM is my,
Your tool.
my tool. AI is going to be even better, but it's not. However it comes up electronically. I can think about a phrase, I can type it into my database, and I can figure out where it appears, which is not exactly the same thing as knowing where it appears and doing those comparative things. I think that there are tools, and I think that there's a whole lot of a whole lot that is lost, when it's all filtered through, a computerized kind of process. It's interesting, by the way, first of all, from Moses to Joshua to the elders to the prophets to the proto-rabbis of the Anshe Knesset Haggadah, and they said three things. Hundreds and hundreds of years for three things. What were the three things? You mean they didn't say anything else, but all those years, hundreds and hundreds of years, three things? But the first thing is havum mitunim badin, be moderate. Don't be fanatical. Like literally, the first values-based teaching in rabbinic literature is be moderate. Don't be an extremist. And that's pretty amazing.
Why do you think
Well,
that
what
is?
makes it even more amazing is that the rabbis linked themselves to the prophets, who I think we could understand as extremists in their own generations. They were not ones that had a lot of followers. And the two groups of people that are copiously left out are the kings and the priests. And it's a statement of how the rabbis saw themselves as charismatic leaders and not tied to hereditary positions, which I think is also important to keep in mind because there is a tendency for people to seek out the hereditary over time as opposed to the spontaneity of charisma.
Pirkei
So,
Avot will say this, right? It's not a Yerusha for you. You know, there's not an inheritance. You got to earn this. In Hasidic tradition, uh, when obviously, like as Barry just said, there is a tendency to people want to reconnect to that dynastic thing, that hereditary thing. But if somebody is like a Rebbe figure, but they didn't come, they're not the child of a Rebbe. This is Yichus Atzmo. It's your own lineage. It's not. There's no ancestral ties. It's the excellence of you yourself as being worthy of your position.
so
There
why
was
do
a
you?
great
I was going to ask why.
I,
Why do you think that was?
there's a great story about the Maggid of Mezrich. When he was a little boy, the family tree of his family burnt. And his mother was very upset that their family tree went up in smoke. And he reassured her and said, "Don't worry, I'll start a new one."
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good.
Why do you think that they are so interested in moderation? Is it historical experience, or is it something about religion altogether, or the Word of God, or?
I think it's both. That it is a historical experience. They lived in through a time and in memory of a time when extremism led to destruction. Right? We're talking about people living in the wake of the destruction of the temple, which had to weigh on people, even as they became more and more removed from it. But also, I think it's part of the religious personality to seek the golden mean. Right? We're not trying to be on either extreme. There are all sorts of images. There's a great image in I guess in the Masachet Chagiga of walking the narrow line where there's danger on either side of you and you have to stay in the middle. And I think that there's a lot of wisdom in that.
You
You
know,
wouldn't.
to the
Yeah.
extent that this first chapter of Avot, which is all, really what you would call them pre-rabbinic or proto-rabbinic kind of figures, they I mean, we can't have any access to know if any of these statements come down were actually then recited in ancient times from even more ancient people, or whether or not they're just attributed to ancient people, because Shimon HaTzadik or Antigonos Isocho, they're much before the rabbis whose names we were familiar with. So I don't have any idea if any of that comes down from that period that you'd call, like, after the close of the Tanakh, but really before the flourishing of rabbinic literature. But I think I'm inclined to think that uh, the whole zealot experience around the destruction of the temple, exactly as Barry said, is pretty daunting, and they would like to chart a different course. But I will also add that we have a tradition, and this part is more like the religious values thing. We have a tradition that says, "Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chayim." People can disagree, and each of them can have some really holy element in what they're saying. The search for truth is really much more important than the possessing of truth exclusively. Like, if you were a zealot and you go down in the flames in Jerusalem, or you are a zealot and you move to Qumran to get to go to the Dead Sea, because you just cannot stand living with these other bad Jews. Like, that is a religious kind of attitude and a fanaticism, and our progenitors in rabbinic Judaism were aware of that, and they didn't want to be that. They wanted to be people who, and we've inherited this from them, who didn't want to just banish, get rid of, or exercise either verbal or physical violence on people you disagree with. This is a tradition that says yesh dvarim b'go. Everybody's got something important to say, and let's figure out how to enhance that. Moshe Halbertal wrote a really fascinating thing. There's this halakhic material about the following problem, right? There's 10 butchers in the shuk, and nine of them are kosher, and one of them is treif. And and you find meat in a wrapper, and you're not sure which of the butcher shops it comes from. Well, at a 9-to-1 ratio, you can assume that it's kosher. Um, and this is Albert Tal writes that in the Dead Sea Scrolls people, this never would have come up because they did not want you to talk to people in the marketplace who were different from them. But the rabbis want you in the marketplace with different kinds of Jews, maybe people you have some disagreement with, but we really want you to live together. And I think that's one of the best parts of this
Well, yeah,
trip.
it's no accident then that that's the first thing that they're saying because they're understanding probably from the trauma of the experience of the consequences of zealotry, that they're building something. We get very excited about this literature. We get very excited about Torah. We get very excited about all this literature, and it could drive you into this world of complete ecstasy and joy, and you can think of nothing else but doing this. This is a very complete world. And yet, what they're telling you is, you have to live with people, and sometimes when you live with people, you have to discuss things with people. You have to agree to work things out, because otherwise you'll be at each other's throats all the time. We are in an era, I suppose you could say, of tremendous polarization. You see that in America, you see it in Israel, you see it everywhere, where we are very tribal about our identities and tribal about our political ideas. And knowing that people like Hillel and Shammai, who probably originated from different sectors within that world and brought different orientations to the study of the Torah and the interpretation of the Torah, and understood that they were both innovators and preservers. They were, passing this tradition down, but also adding innovations, and we could spend a lot of time talking about that. That they had a lot to disagree on, and yet they understood that if you want to stay together, you have to keep the conversation open, and you have to at least respect each other. And it's, to me, that's very interesting that the first thing that is stated in this really definitive of rabbinic text is a statement of respect, a statement of moderation, a statement that, we're here to deliberate. We're not taking things for granted. We have our tendencies, even the three of us, as careful watchers will observe, we have our tendencies in terms of, where we go with certain texts, but we often surprise each other too. And I think that itself becomes the model that's imprinted by this text, that all these rabbis are having conversations with each other, which is why we love this text so much. It's a book of conversations. I don't know if you have any last words here. We're reaching the end here of our time. But so take the second line, Va'amida tamidim arbe. I would say that here they're saying be deliberate, okay, in the way that we stated. You want to sustain the system. So have students, make a culture that keeps you alive by transmitting. Vasu siag la Torah, and put a fence around the Torah. Jeremy, fence around the Torah. Press play on that one. What do you mean? What do we mean?
What does fence around the Torah mean?
Yeah.
Well, I'll say a handy example that people will be familiar with. You don't. I mean, it's not exactly a siyag la Torah because it's considered a dioraita to add to Shabbat. It's considered a Torah legislation, but you don't light candles right at sunset. You light candles 18 minutes before sunset, so you don't accidentally transgress Shabbat. You technically you have to stop eating chametz at noon on the afternoon before Pesach, but we stop we move it a couple hours before that because you don't want to accidentally transgress because what if it's a cloudy day and you're not exactly sure? So be real sure that you're not even close. It's like a it's like a I was just in Moed Katan just doing that tractate, and it said, certain work that you can do on Shabbat, on the intermediate days of the festival. You can build a ma'akeh l'gagecha, build a parapet to your roof. Rashi gives us a definition of the word ma'akeh, which is surprising, a pretty common word. I wouldn't think that it deserves a definition, but Rashi says, you know, it's like when you go to the Rhine, there's a well-known guardrail at the Rhine. I thought this is incredibly cool. Like, it's a piece of medieval European. Everybody knows that there is a guardrail when you go up to the Rhine, so you don't fall in. And that's how we think of a Sayag La Torah, as a guardrail so you don't fall off.
It's protecting you and protecting the Rhine. All right. Well, we had a great introduction to Pirkei Avot here. I'm really, really glad about that.
But what do you have a favorite? Do you have a favorite one? Do you have
I
a
do have
favorite?
a favorite one today.
What
I like the Benzoma and Benzoma in chapter 4, number 1. Ezehu Chacham Alamed Mikol Adam, who is wise, one who learns from everyone, etc. We're out of time, but the reason why I chose Benzoma because Benzoma figured in the Haggadah, and Benzoma, too bad he has a lousy name, but the guy knew how to spin a couple of words. He knew how to drash.
He was no slouch.
He was no slouch, and I think there's a lot of wisdom there. Anyway, to our
you
viewers
have
or listeners,
like,
yeah, go ahead.
I'll just throw one of my. I mean, there's a lot of real gems in here, but in the third chapter, number 9, Chanina ben Dosa Omer Kol sheyirat chet'o kodemet lechokhmato chokhmato mitkayemet. If your reverence exceeds your wisdom will endure. But if your wisdom exceeds your reverence, your wisdom is not going to endure. You're just going to be a smartass. And kol shema'asav merubin michokhmato. If your deeds are better than your wisdom will. If your deeds exceed your wisdom will endure. But if you know stuff but don't do stuff, you got no future as a Jew with
You
that.
got no future. I was
You
just
got to
reading.
Okay,
do.
so I'm going to add mine. Today, there are a lot of good ones, but today it's Shammai Omer Makabel Kol Adam B'Sever Panim Yafot. That we're used to thinking of Shammai as a gruff guy chasing people away with a yardstick. But here he says that you should greet everyone with a happy face. And I think the message is in Pirkei Avot is that there's a lot of unexpected things in life that we have to appreciate. And we can't put things into too many pigeonholes and not allow them to breathe and to percolate and ferment.
Well, that's
Nice.
all great, and these are great teachings. We invite our viewers and listeners take a walk in Pirkei Avot, dip in. You will be enlightened, inspired, and you will know that it's been worthwhile, as is the time that you spend with us, for which we thank you. We want to say thank you to all of our viewers, and we'll see you. Have a wonderful Yontiv and a wonderful Shabbos. Back again sometime next week. See ya. Shabbat Shalom.
That's all.
Bye
And the
bye.
facts of math.